I think people are going to continue to filter in, but I'll go ahead and do a little bit of orientation, and then we can get started. We have about 62 people registered for this, which blew away our expectations, especially for a topic as traditionally unsexy as strategic planning. And I think it really speaks volumes to the need that's being recognized. That is, so you can probably see, this is Stacy Miller. You see the little phone next to my name and on the left-hand side. And you can see the presenters, and along with Jeff, a chat pod right below the attend. We're going to ask that you submit questions that you have for the presenters. There will be some specific time set aside for Q&A throughout the presentation, but we do want to encourage you, if you have a specific question related to, address it right away or address it at the next set aside little Q&A break. So we do have a couple little polls that we're going to integrate to keep it interactive. We, as you know, instituted a question on the registration for this webinar that solicited a little bit information about said that you have a strategic plan being planned, so to speak, so that you're about to develop one with your organization, or that you'd like to develop one someday in the future. At the end, there might be some time for folks to share their experience with their organizations. In some ways, the beginning of a dialogue that might continue among FMC members and others in the farmers market community. A partnership with the Wallace Center at Winrock International with support from USDA through an FMPP grant and a risk management agency grant. And we have set up a series of 6 webinars, and most of you probably summer, and they're on a variety of topics, and we are going to be instituting a stipend program where state and regional associations that have large market manager conferences can utilize some of this information, an application form for that. These stipends are very small, I should say, probably a maximum of $300, but they could cover some of the expenses associated with having a meeting or a workshop. So that information about that operative for any reason. The number to dial back in is 866-213-4834, and you should see it in one of the little pods there, just in case. So without too much more ado, I'm going to introduce our presenters really quick. Nicole de Beaufort is with Fourth Sector Consulting. She has a lot of experience working with a variety of nonprofits, particularly in the food system sphere, and I'm really delighted. And she was involved doing a strategic plan for. Time flies. So she's going to offer a little bit of. Please use the little the chat pod to submit your question.
Nicole de Beaufort, and you should be able to see a black and white photo of me on your screen. And there's a primary role with organizations is doing planning, and in particular strategic. So I'm looking forward to being one of your presenters.
I'm really excited to be here with Nicole, in part because I'm the Oregon Farmers Market Association. When our strategic planning process happened, which is what jump-started our strategic planning process. So I've had a number of different. I have been the cat in the hat with a number of different roles. And I come today as I'm glad I'm here, and you're here too. And some very specific in that process to your organization. We really want to emphasize the fact that this is a different kind that you want to have in place. And finally, Nicole, I think, will really offer up a lot of what she sees as best practice.
Thanks, Karen, and this is Nicole again, and I'm going to put up some commonly held assumptions about strategic planning. It's not something that causes people to jump up and down, mainly because there's a lot of assumptions that strategic planning is not a very useful use of time. And in fact, there's a very common quote that says strategic planning is worthless unless there's first a strategic vision. And so that's a very important point to keep in mind, really important, because that leads you then to having some goals. And without having a strategic plan that helps you know where you want to go, a goal without a plan is just a wish. And so what we're hoping to do here is have some really great examples from Karen's experience, and she's done it, and she is like you. She has run farmers markets, and she's running a statewide farmers market association. And so, who better than to give you an example of how it's worked for her? And I've been working with nonprofits in the food systems world, and so I can information. So, with that in mind, let's get right to it. Okay, one of the things that we thought was really important was that we didn't create an expectation that there's perfection in strategic planning. In fact, as you know, running farmers markets that is all about human services and not about selling products or working with different vendors like farmers and producers. And so we know that you have you're in a unique situation, and we also know that there's no one size fits all. So we want to make this really realistic. And yes, Bobby, we will have these slides available after we finish to answer your question. So I'll start with a basic overview, and then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of Ozma. But basically, strategic planning, it helps you know where you want to go over the next year or more. And I would say, a lot of people say, how far in advance should we go with strategic planning? 3 years, 5 years. It's really helpful to do 1 year at a time. It's nice to think about where you want to be in 5 years, but it's a lot more realistic if you're just doing a year in advance and then with some longer-term goals that are not as fleshed out. But what you're doing really is formally considering where you want to go in the future. And the focus of your plan about how you want your organization to run. And there are many ways and approaches to do it. And the way that you do it depends on what the nature of your organization is, what your culture is within your organization, how complex the environment in which you're operating is, how competitive it is, how many people are in your organization and the capacity you have, as well as how much experience you have. So I like to make things as simple as possible. And one of the first things that I recommend people to think about when they want to engage in strategic planning is asking themselves a couple of really important questions. One, knowing what you do. So what do you do? What do we do? And then who do we do it for? Or for whom do we do it if we want to be grammatically correct? And then how do we excel? What makes us so good at what we do? What is our secret sauce? The next step would be, where do you want to go? And so I have a little diagram here because I want to emphasize that it is a process after all. It's not something that is beginning, middle, and end. Strategic plans fail often because they are created. It's really critical that whatever process you choose or whatever style you choose, that when you're doing strategic planning, you think of it as something that doesn't really have an end. You're going to have a lot of milestones, but you're probably going to be coming back again and again, maybe on a yearly basis, to who are we? How have things changed? Where do we want to go? But you always start with your purpose and your mission. So and that could also be and then you look at, what are your objectives? So what do you want to accomplish? Do you want to increase your sales? Do you want to show economic impact for your region? Do you want to build a capital fund that will create a public permanent structure for your market? So think about what your objectives are. So that's the second step. And then there's this we call a SWOT analysis, where you're looking at your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. There are also other ways to call it, but basically what you're doing is understanding exactly where you fit into the bigger picture. So it's looking outward. The first two steps are really inward. Who are we? What do we want to accomplish? The third step is looking outward, and then doing some analysis so that you understand, okay, here's the situation we're in. Here's our environment. What do we make of it? And that's the analysis part. It's not enough to just understand our market has this much potential market share, and this many potential farmers within this distance, you actually have to think about, so how does that fit with our vision of ourselves and where we want to go? Is it appropriate? Achieving our objective process, because it's usually done in a brainstorming way. It's usually a very creative process that ultimately leads then to the next step, which is making decisions. As many of you are probably aware, it's really nice to have lots and lots of ideas and tons of objectives, but it's much more realistic to have only a few things that you're going to commit to. And that's really what makes a difference between successful plans and ultimately don't really serve an organization, is really prioritizing which are the most important. And then that leads to action and implementation. So deciding what are the 3, 5, or 7 things that are most important to our market or to our organization. How are we going to do it this year? Who's going to be responsible? And finally, the last part of the process is reflection and evaluation. Always knowing how you're doing. You know, a lot of strategic planning is trying new things to see if you can meet your objectives. And some evaluation, and not judgment, but evaluation to understand what's working, what's not working, how can we adjust. It's recalibrating. It's like when you turn on faucets, you're playing with the flow of the water, the heat, everything. You're just trying to make it the perfect temperature and the perfect flow. It works that way with the strategic planning process too. And then you just begin all over again. So that is, in a nutshell, the process. And as I said, there are many styles. So this is just a really generic, ta-da! I'm going to turn the phone over to Karen so you can hear a real-life story.
Thank you. Actually, I'm going to start our classic story, this classic tale of dreams and transitions with, ta-da, no staff and no money, of Ozma, by just keeping in mind this last piece of the purpose and mission of the top little box on Nicole's strategic planning process. We are going into this story looking at who we are, again, this idea of finding our identity with the organization in mind. The Oregon Farmers Market Association is a really good-looking organization on paper and in our website. We're a 20-year-old organization that is nonprofit, volunteer-run. It's long-standing. It's got a great reputation, and we're incredibly under-resourced. We have loads of expertise in the pieces of the next step, which is part of what generated the need for a grant and seeking the FMPP, as it's known, the Farmers Market Promotion Grant, to get some money. And in fact, our big dream was to transition out of being an all-volunteer organization to having a staff person. So that was, in fact, the ostensible goal and objective of all of our activities when I came on board. So looking at who we are, finding out who we are and what we do, or informs what we do. Our mission and our vision has really held true, and I think it's a wonderful, solid vision and mission with some great guiding principles. And what we needed to do and will always do as an organization is to continue to reinvest in that and make sure it's holding true to who we are. In fact, if we talk about the strategic planning process, this idea that it's not a static activity, it's a journey. And who we are is our touchstone on that journey. We really need to come back to this on a regular basis. And the Oregon Farm, we have at that point 88 members, and we didn't know really who they were. How did they define themselves, and what do they stand for? My screen is popping all around. I don't know if yours is, but
my fault, Karen. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So we'll get back to where we were here. So we had a definitional problem because we couldn't define our members. Managers. So were they representing their markets or the whole? Were we what we did? Are we our actions? Just like we fall into the trap of being human doings as opposed to human beings? That identity is not our behavior. So we really needed to look at that. And the final piece is, were we a mother hen? In fact, people called us that, and they said we had an organization full of mother hens, or a Medusa with these long tentacles reaching out into the states. This was a metaphorical opportunity or analogy for us to really look at us and say, is that what we want to be? Is that a healthy thing for us to be? So all of these identity questions came up in the beginning of our planning and grant process. And how that might look is this. So on the left side, you'll see the organizational and board activities under the organizational needs. And on the right side is our members and our services. When we entered our process, we really thought of ourselves simply as an organization that does stuff for markets. We are a member-driven, service-oriented organization. And our organizational needs paled in comparison. We really had forgotten and not transferred into every generation of boards the institutional history and institutional memories. And so we became very, very aware of the fact that inwards there was a real dearth, a real lacking in some of our own structures. So the compass that we needed for our journey might have been the center, the little bullseye in the middle was only half there. It was all focused outwards on the members. Which brings me to then the next slide of talking about what I've been learning along the way. We created a process and a plan, but it does matter. Size matters when you're talking about an organization or the size of your exploration, the size of your plan. You really do need to take a very serious look at what we can find out where you need to go. That means assessing your current capabilities and your need for that strategic plan. Why now? What would we gain by waiting or jumping? And engaging all the staff and the board and the stakeholders at all stages of your development. That became one of our sticking points. There were times when there were teams of one all over the place. For communication made it hard for us to even activate and take action. I'd like to really give you a kind of a caveat here when you're looking at the size question. The longer range planning of a strategic plan, 1 to 3 years generally, does require that you have some real stability, organizational stability. It's very hard to plan in a crisis, and it's unrealistic to look ahead if you don't have confidence that we're to plan out the functions that will be existing and the objectives and the goals, and to be able to lay the foundation for this longer-term planning. If you're so young that you don't have good leadership and you don't have a good sense of your community or your environment, it may be hard to get into this journey of strategic planning while you're still laying your foundation. So, learning from your experience, I guess, is what happens along the way, and strategic planning can happen most easily as you gain that. You could do a short-term or single-year plan, short-range things before you jump into strategic planning. A final little caveat is that it takes a lot of time and energy. If you're doing a really formal needs assessment and creating as much input as you possibly can, it's really demanding. It's not a one-time effort. You have to really go back and visit and revisit this, as Michelle's earlier slide, or Nicole's slides pointed out. So just kind of remember that when you're making your size matters assessment. So here's our plan. This is the whole pizza pie. Our example was really a full-fledged, hopefully interactive process. You can see that the two lighter color slices of that pizza pie, outreach and inreach, were the most substantial portion, and we had the benefit of an 18-month grant process and a single person devoted to this, so I could do that. If you have no staff and you have a board that's really, really busy, this is going to be a challenge, and you really have to understand how that would look. And to really create an opportunity to look out and then reach in. In-reach is more the internal focused communication and exploration, as I call it. Developing the plan was really the final capstone, as it were, and that was the last 15 or 20% of the activities, along with the research that was kind of a preamble to it as well. So it's a big one. we did it well and we did it right, but there was challenges for this that I'll talk about. Another way you might do this as one element is something like this, a simple survey. This is a page from our Survey Monkey, to use a brand name. They are wonderful ways of getting snapshots from the community. So you can poll a lot of people without leaving the confines of your office, as it were, and get some great information back that help you chart this and explain it and use it for other kinds of reports and data implementation. So keep those in mind. I really do recommend them. So from there, we go into what Nicole might suggest about making a strategic plan that's painless.
Strategic planning without pain. So one of the fun things about preparing for this was looking at all the different farmers market posters that are on Google. If you go to Google Images and you search for farmers market posters, there's some beautiful art and really interesting. People expect when they start their strategic planning that they're going to have a lot of aha moments where they reach great insight or have these catalytic, turning points in their organization. And in fact, it's more of a series of small moves and small victories, actually, that keep your organization doing things right as it heads in the right direction. Once you have a direction, and that's the point, is that it's not something that is going to change your organization overnight, but it's going to keep moving you in the right direction. The other thing is that a lot of people that I've worked with in the past usually have put off strategic planning because they are afraid of what they're going to find out when they actually take a look inward and look outward. They think things are going to be really terrible, and they don't want to hear criticism. And actually, one of the things that's really proved to be true in my experience is that things aren't usually as bad as you think, but they're also not as good as you'd like them to be. And it's that good as you'd like them to be part where you really need to start. So you go into where do you want to begin, and start simple. But the basic thing is to start. So one of the things that would be really helpful, responsible for a lot of the day-to-day work of your organization, you're probably putting out fires all the time, and you're in reaction mode. And so it's really difficult to be able to stand back and look at not only doing this process, but how you are able to organize a process and get it going. And so really thinking about what your organization style is, what your style is, your management style, how you think you might be able to make progress is important at the outset.
So this is Wagner style. We figured this was going to be really pain-free, and I'll say we now because I'm here. I wasn't part of this process when it started. So they said, oh, we have no money. Let's get a grant. We got the grant. And then they said, we have no staff. That's what we're going to do. Our dream is to hire a contractor first off, or a consultant, who will then, we will send them out into the world to make a plan for us. Oh, this is so wonderful. This is absolutely pain-free. We like this style. So in that process, then a new board of directors came on, and the people who got the grant went away, and the new board director said, well, this is really cool. All got really busy doing what markets make you do, the little beasts that they are, cracking their whip, sending us off into the world of fun and urgency, and that was really painless as far as they were concerned. They had me writing their plan, and they were unavailable to do much more about that. So that's the happily ever after style. Not.
And was that painless for you, Karen?
Oh, no. That was a really interesting, shall we say, I gained a lot. This was the no pain, no gain for me version on the other side of that coin. So I learned a lot.
Well, and I will talk about a couple of other styles, and I had a little bit of fun with this because there are so many different ways you can consider yourself, and there are also different models, which I'll talk about a little bit towards the end. But the next style are really responsible for stewarding the direction of your organization needed as well. and you just put it on your list. And you, like Karen's situation, you actually develop it alone. And so what you're usually doing is responding. You're carrying the load, and then once or twice a year, people refer to a plan. And you go back and say, yeah, the plan. And actually, some of my clients have repeatedly gone back and said, oh, yeah, well, we have this plan. And one of the values of having that reflection period is asking them, so, and how is your plan working for you? And then people usually get back into the, oh, yes, my plan. We haven't really been following it, but let's look at it again, and let's have a meeting about it. And so that's another style that we're pretty familiar with. And I have this image from if you want to have a good strategic plan, despite the obvious impediments to your progress, it's really good in that case to keep it so simple that you can write out what you need to do on the back of a napkin, so that no matter what, you can have a big picture on a little piece of paper that shows you where you want to go. Okay, the next one is a hybrid, and I think the hybrid is kind of where we'd like everyone to be. It's in a perfect world, because everyone's busy, and you want to use strategic thinking, and you want to constantly be analyzing, are we making decisions that fit into our larger objective? You try to, as much as possible, get buy-in from people who are decision makers in your organization, whether they're management or your board or other clients, like scenario planning. Scenario planning is actually a technique more than a model, but what it does is it looks to the future. You can say, given that the price of oil affects how many miles some of our farmers are willing to travel to market, we can predict that if gas goes up to $4 a gallon, we're going to have X many fewer vendors. How are we going to adjust to that? So scenario planning looks at different variables and helps you understand, as a technique, how your environment might change. If you're looking at goals-based planning, it's most common, and it starts with your mission and vision and values, and you're trying to work towards your mission using strategies to achieve the goals and doing assignments, who's going to do what by when, and really being accountable. Issues-based strategic planning looks at issues and strategies to address those issues. So your issue might be, we have somebody who's managed our market or our association for 25 years, and we need to develop a transition plan so that in 5 years, when that person retires, we're going to have a seamless transition. Everybody's going to be happy. It's going to be win-win. And then there's the organic version, which is really looking at your vision and values and then action plans. And it's really, looking at the different approach. So you might prefer a consultant coming in and doing some appreciative inquiry, which is really a process that adds, that doesn't have a predetermined ending. Some people get impatient with that process, but then, it's really just whatever works for you. I have on here, I was looking at a lot of different dashboards to show progress. And one of the things that is really interesting to try and looking at how things are going, and here you see there's 3 circles, and this is for Ohio, and it's related to an initiative to keep more people in Ohio in school in Ohio and graduate from college in Ohio, and also attracting people to go to school there. And so those are 3 indicators that show how that plan is working. And so it's really good to have those kinds of things that are available and in place so that your organization can know how they're doing, and then, in a hybrid way, try to mix and match different ways of different techniques and processes so that you can continue to get the kind of results you want without having to be a slave to one way, because there is no one way, really. Okay, so one of the things that I think are well, actually many things are critical here. When you start a strategic planning process, it's really important that you're all on the same page. You have a shared vision. In my firm, we do a lot of informant or in-depth things we ask is, so what is your mission? And what's your vision for the organization? And what is the top message of the organization? And we usually know how well the process is going to turn out from that one question, because sometimes you get organizations that are so in line, it's almost scary. They're like saying the exact same words over and over again. It's total alignment. In some cases, you get generally on the same page. And in some cases, unfortunately, you get wide, disparate views. And that's where we usually put up little warning signs saying, no, I don't know who you are. Because if you don't know who you are, you really shouldn't be laying out a roadmap for where you're going, because you're going to be like the Medusa head. You're going to be going in all those different directions. The second part is really important when you're bringing together lots of different stakeholders. So you might have board members, you might have staff, you might have vendors coming in. And when you're in a process like planning, it's really important to not let the things like respect and trust get forgotten. It should be intentional to build a relationship during this planning process that helps inspire collaboration and respect and trust, because what you're doing is co-creating a set of actions that you're going to put into motion that will help make your organization successful. And if you don't like or trust or respect the people you're working with, it's not likely that people are going to be able to work well together on it, and it's likely that you're going to have believing in the process is also important. And there are people in this world who are process-driven, and there are people in this world who are process-driven but don't know it and say that they hate process, and there are people who simply can't stand process. So make it as painless, again, know your organizational style. And so if you know that you have a bunch of process-driven people on your team, you are going to be in hog heaven. But if you know that you have people who are really impatient, who want to get to the doing, then make it a shorter process. But do initiate a process, because it's that circle again. It's a journey, not a destination. Accountability of the plan, and have people really, truly accountable, and have measures that are not punitive, but that really set forth, okay, Nicole is responsible for making sure that the communications about the plan happens to our internal audiences, and Nicole is going to report back on how that works. So accountability is really important, because if people are going to participate, you want them to own the outcome and own the process. Ground rules, that's just the basic setting parameters around what you're doing so that you don't get scope creep. I don't know if you guys are familiar with scope creep, but basic communications, of course, very important. Then now we get into the nitty-gritty. When you're doing goal setting and objective setting, you want to have them be measurable. So as much as possible, say, how can we quantify that? How will we know we've met our goal or reached our objective? And always have that inquiry of how will we know we got there? What are the things that will tell us, so that there is, if you do all these things, you're actually creating goodwill towards each other in your organization. You're creating a value in your organization, an equity of we can actually do something like create a strategic plan together. And perhaps we are even creating a plan that makes our organization stronger. And in so doing, we're actually making ourselves stronger. And that's valuable, and that the people who are involved in it see it as valuable as well.
That's wonderful. Let's stay right with that one for a second. I would like to comment that what I see here is a really seriously humanistic focus on what the planning is about. It's about the people and how you interact and how you establish your behavior with each other. And throughout this whole journey, you establish these kind of operational tools with each other. And I'm moving away from this piece of planning, strategic planning, which is incredibly important. It's like the as she says, must-have, into the technical aspect of our planning process. So you can get a sense then of where we went with the actual activities. So we're moving into, for our plan and the way we look at ourselves as markets. So let me explain this rather complicated, attractive bullseye. This is a model that was developed by Oregon State University Small Farms Program. They call it the market model. I call it the community atmosphere and product model, which are the things that markets manage for. And they manage for those things on the center, in the inside of our bullseye, which in fact is the identity piece, the compass and touchstone of an organization. We manage to make sure those things are operating optimally. and the yellow ring signifies that. We kind of affect it from the outside in this way. The management also has to reflect the green band of the context or the environment they're in. So all of those things that relate to our town, their sense of trust, the atmosphere that's promoted as a community about who we are, all those things are in our environment. So this is a look at the operating context for a market. And it exists in this bigger blue realm of the final outside square containing the bullseye is the environment of national and international kinds of effects or influences. The Oregon Farmers Market Association realized that if we are going to offer support to organizations that are using this model as their framework for development, the association developed out of its strategic planning process SWOTs that reflected each of these areas, community, atmosphere, and product. They didn't look exactly like that as we prioritized them in the end, but they helped provide a framework for us. Let's see, what else can I tell you about this one? This is kind of the big picture, high altitude look at where we went with ours. And again, SWOT, strengths and weaknesses, happen at the internal setting of an organization. So what kind of product and community atmosphere may be reflected in the inner rings as strengths and weaknesses, how you manage them certainly as a strength or a weakness. And the opportunities and threats come from the outside generally. Generally, that's not always true. They can come from anywhere. But internal, like, shall we say, global warming or the Farm Bill, all those things from the outside are part of the big picture arenas that especially the Farmers Market Association and the Farmers Market Coalition will be keeping their eyes on. So those are opportunities and threats. So moving on then, what did that look like for us as we planned? They, in fact, became strategic areas of focus. And as we noted earlier, the Oregon Farmers Market Association did not have a strong sense of itself to increase our ability to effectively run our business, to manage from that yellow circle perspective, as it were, while we adapt and renew ourselves so we can continually be able to respond to the outside influences. The next 3 bullet points were what were developed for our membership. They are the activities that we would undertake to provide member services and benefits. These are kind of in the wings right now. Education and training for management skills, building the capacity of our managers and our boards and our vendors. Farmers market visibility, this is a opportunity to increase the public awareness of farmers markets, expanding our outreach, our marketing and promotions and educational activities. And the third strategic area of focus is niche research. And what we mean by that is then keeping an eye on the bigger picture, learning how to advocate for this incredible new farm direct sales arena, this new, shall we say, actually it's a very old traditional arena of agriculture where the slow food and local food movements have landed. We're really wanting to make sure we're positioned well so we can enhance the viability and availability of farmers markets in all communities as this trend of local food moves in whatever direction it does in the future. And to look at another bullet point, this shows really that our board has decided to bring themselves into the foreground. The left-hand side of this bullseye is now in great screaming colors our primary focus. This is sort of depicting the mantra that we've developed. We're putting on our oxygen mask first before we help others. So it became strategically clear that we needed to be as the best we could be before we could provide the best services. So our oxygen mask is pumping new energy into our internal organizations and committees and operations where we haven't lost track of the important services that we always have and will continue to offer, but we're reorienting a lot of our activities to take on some new things for us. And as we move into this, what do we do now has been a question that is posed all along the way. Our plan is in the can, as it were. I developed it. I passed it off. We had retreats and strategy sessions around what this plan looked like and meant for us. But some of the things then that we have that have come to me as learnings and activities that or questions touched on, but better to do it right than to do it over in assessing our capacity and our time and the imperatives. If you don't get this first piece right, you can really lose your chance for a second opportunity if you create disillusionment or apathy from within. So taking your time, going through the processes that Nicole noted, really setting things up so people can be involved and invested is really critical, or you could lose. For us, we have had to actually kind of different way it looked like. So the plan was developed without as much input as we wanted. So the way for us to get reinvestment has been to call this a straw dog. It has given the new committee members or board members an opportunity to form committees with work plans that they can take ownership of, that are part of the strategic plan. And as we go, we're learning how to have trust and respect to the fact. It's been a really interesting process, and I don't know if we would call it completely successful, because as we say, it's a journey. But it's been, I think, a way of ensuring that we stay on track, even though we did it differently. We had to be flexible. And another thing, the final little bullet point, is noting the little steps of successes along the way. We're making progress, and we really have taken some opportunities on a quarterly basis to look back and see where we are, who's done what, where is it going, how have we managed to get further down the road that we've established, and our journey becomes apparent by looking backwards. And I think that's really important. You can't see where you're going generally. You have to look where you've been. And it's been helpful to celebrate with each other along the way. Okay, then moving into what Nicole might have to say on this one.
Sorry about the flipping around on the slides, Karen.
Oh, that's okay.
So one of the things that thinking into your organization and into the way that you approach your work, I know that as practically a professional firefighter at work in terms of putting out fires, it's really hard to get out of the responsive mode. But one of the things that's really essential to being strategic is being ahead of the game. So thinking broadly, thinking ahead, and not just always responding. There's this piece of advice that was given to me when I started my business, and it was, don't be always in the business, be on top of the business. And part of that is being proactive and seeing what's coming up, and not just being totally immersed in it without perspective. The second thing is, you can't be all things to all people, and I think we've all heard that a million times, but you do want to be selective. You want to be who you want to be and what you want to be doing to the right people. So making sure that you're integrated. They're in this environment and new technologies and new products and new ways of doing things. And one of the things that is really hard to do is hold back and have some perspective about it. So one of the things to be strategic about is, how will this integrate, this tool, this process, this person, this new trend, this new piece of information, this new grant, integrate into our bigger picture. So it's big picture thinking. It's asking yourself how this integrates, has an impact on that, and how to be flexible when situations change. And I have the word agility in there. Being agile is really important, especially these days, because we are in a time in civilization where we are changing fast, and knowing how focused we are on what we want is really important because it helps us avoid the extra noise that is inevitable and that can take up a lot of headspace and waste your time. So just staying focused is, I can't emphasize that enough in terms of being a strategic organization. Finally, I'm always asked, what's the right way to do a plan? What does a plan need to look like? And my answer, I hope not, you could have a poster. I mean, ultimately, if you're able to have these 4 kinds of squares, the information that's in here on this slide, then it doesn't matter if it's an Excel template or a Word document or a PowerPoint or an index card or a mural on the side of a building. It's really, this is all you need. And so that's, I'm trying to say in many words, there's no one right way to have a template. But you do have to know who you are, what you do, part 1. Part 2, what do you need to do to realize your vision, and how will you know you're making progress? So setting solid objectives that are quantifiable and measurable. Then you have the third part goes down to the left bottom. So understanding what's happened, what are the, and I put in 5 here, but what are the most important things we can do? It's really hard sometimes when you're working in a collaborative process to come up with as few as 5 things that you can agree to do. Typically, I'm working with groups that might have 30. So how do you take 30 priorities and hone them down to 5 things that you can all agree on? And so that might take a couple of sheets of flip chart. When you put it into your plan, it should be 5 bullet points with as much explanation as you want. And then finally, there should be a place in your plan about how you will do things. So it's that ownership piece. Who's going to do what by when? When do you plan to stop and reflect? Is it half a year? Are you going to meet after the market season and then right before? Or are you going to meet once a year to reflect? Or are you going to do it monthly, weekly? What works for your organization's style? And the people like saying, we're going to take 15 minutes once a month at our staff meeting and go through and see how we're doing. Or you might have a really high-tech environment that you're working in, or have somebody who loves to play with gadgets and tools and can create a dashboard for you that you can see where you are at any given time. And that might be a daily reflection. But at some point, you're going to want to come together as a group and meet in person and say, how are we doing? And so I would say, whenever somebody asks me, what does my plan need to look like, it doesn't really matter what it looks like as long as it has the answers to these questions in it. And how much space you take to answer those questions is totally up to you.
So actually, I see that Dan had a question about going back to the previous slide. Was that this slide, Dan? I don't know if you want to type in what you were. Do you have a question for Nicole potentially, or you just wanted to see it?
Dan, I've actually unmuted you.
What did you mean when you for selective? You said not all things to all people, a few things to the right people. So does that mean that when you're doing the strategic thinking in regards to your experiences, that you're trying to highlight certain things that are favorable to a certain stakeholder or to the organization as a whole? That's what I was trying to understand with that part.
Okay. Well, so what I meant by selective is oftentimes we're asked to add things. So, like Nicole, can you do there? Because I'm not.
Oh, I see.
I'm not in that business. So it's really I guess it's remembering why you do what you do. You're in the business to do. I'm in the business to do planning and communications, but I'm not in the business to do facilities management. Sometimes I get asked to do things that don't fit into my plan. And I'm sure that happens to others. I mean, does it happen to you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's yeah, and it's hard. It's hard to say no sometimes because sometimes there's strings attached. Sometimes there's money involved, resources, people. So, but it is important because when you.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Very good. So moving forward through that template of the strategic plan into what one might really look like, we'll take a page from the Ozma Plan. I had to cough a little bit when Nicole said, gee, I hope you're not making a 50-page document.
Oops, sorry.
Look, mine is 48 pages. not counting the appendices, which made it 75 pages long.
Wow.
I was getting a lot of support from the academicians at OSU who thought this was a wonderful thing, but I think they thought it was a thesis that I have developed very shortly after it came out, a 12-page Cliff Note variety with everything that was really important highlighted and boxed with bullet points. So just to let you know what can go into a strategic plan, and it's good to have, but probably in many, many fewer pages. Preface and acknowledgments, of course, you honor your contributors. The executive summary, this is really useful when you're putting things on your website, or you want to give the elevator speech, or your funders need to know what really occurred. You've got it all in that nice little snapshot. The introductions really talked about, for us, the whole process from project to planning to actualization, the why of this plan. And I will say that, again, our grant really overshadowed or created the context for creating the strategic plan, which is not what I'd recommend. Really be specific and clear about strategies, not this other big effort that we had going on that was kind of the context of it. Section 1 was about the plan, the methodologies, the models, the framework, how we were kind of putting it together, the format of the document. Section 2 was the what is of our organization, really laying out where we were. This was really important for me and maybe for the rest of the new board members because it really highlighted the historical, institutional activities of the organization, the place that it had found itself in, and I think we needed to have that in writing, but probably not in a strategic plan. So our strengths and our weaknesses came out in this section. Understanding the external context, the needs there in Section 3, were the outside rings potentially of that bullet, the market model from the professors again at OSU. That one really helped us look at the trends and opportunities and threats that we were facing. And we talked a lot about the SWOTs, all of the surveys and the responses and the analysis that we got in Section 3. Section 4 was implementation, what we're going to do and with what resources. So all of the goals and the focus areas were lined out. The financial planning and considerations there, a tentative budget, which was really just an exercise in kind of a dream, but exploring all the options that would be available. We had no money at that point to implement the plan and get where we wanted our strategy to go. It was a big one. The key focus areas and summary tables, those are charts, work plan charts actually, that each committee has adopted and are making their own right now. So even though it was written basically by me, by one person, as I handed them off to the newly established committees, they have been able to take these focus areas and amend them and redraft them and turn this big straw dog into rather than a house of straw, into something that's very I guess that's all I would say about it, the whole pizza pie. There are opportunities. At this point, I have a concluding slide, and we can do some question and answers after that. Let's just move right here. These came out of my head, and I bet Nicole would have some other ideas. We'll see. The conclusions that came to me with strategic planning as it occurred with the Oregon Farmers Market Association was that the planning really does not determine the outcome. You do, the people do, the process does. So so you have to be ready to make those choices along the way, and the plan is not going to give you some kind of end goal results. It will change along the way. So the second bullet point is speaking to that. It's about the process and the people, not the document. I was so happily wrapped up in writing 50 pages of a wonderful document that and it was kind of where I needed to be, I think, in that whole situation for us. But the document has to get up and live, not sit on some shelf anywhere. Documents get dusty. People don't. The third bullet point works best in the plain speak of your organization and not the plan speak of academics or experts. My cliff notes are more the plain speak of the organization. The plan speak came out of the language that I used in creating that big document, and I think it all relates back to the style that you're looking for, that, you know, who you are is reflected in your poster, it's reflected in your logo, it's reflected in your work. It's kind of visionary and likes to speak in big, lofty, metaphorical kind of allusions. That's great. Make the plan talk like that, so it reflects you and your words. The last one is strategic planning is not to be right, but to be ready. And again, that's just a reflection on the journey. It's about having an eye on what's going on around you, what you're passing, who's passing you, you know, what are the currents that are floating around about you, so that you can drop your sail or shift your rudder, or adjusting all the time around the mission and your identity. Don't adjust your identity for that, but work around your identity, make sure you can take on what's coming. I think that's all I have to say about those in conclusion of this presentation. What about you, Nicole?
Well, I think you absolutely nailed it. It's especially with the part about the metaphor that you've been using with journey. It is a journey, and as with any journey, it's not going to always be as smooth as you want it to be, and there are going to be potholes in the road, or there's going to be to have people in your boat or on your bus that want to go to the same place that you do, and it is important to speak in your language, and not in a way that you're going to look at it and go, what was the thinking behind that? You want it to be something that's very user friendly. So even if you come up with a few short lines that sum up what your plan is about, we want to get to this by 2010, we want to get to this by 2012, it's much better if that's the way your organization works than trying to adopt or copy the style of something that you find online that looks like a good plan. And absolutely, it's not to be right, to be ready, and it's the agility, the flexibility. We are living in a time that we have never seen before. Your plan can in fact act as a rudder for you and help you steer your organization in the right direction. So just to
Great.
And now we're ready for questions if you have any.
Holly Hendricks is the yes, I see that. So is the strategic plan available online for review? No. Our website is being redeveloped, so a lot of things are not online. What we've tried to do is put the cliff notes up, but I have every intention to kind of paring down what we offer because there's so much inside information, as it were. So what I can say is that there's a bit of an outline that I have created that I sent to Stacy for posting here about our process, and there will be something on the website probably in the next month when we've got it all available that you could take a look at.
Okay, and I'm happy to answer Christy's question, which is, do you feel it's crucial to have an outside facilitator? And I'd love Karen's take on it, too. I often am that outside facilitator who's not in the thick of your organization, who can give you a little bit of perspective, perhaps act as a, just a third party when doing some interviews for that analysis part with your stakeholders. Facilitators can be really good. If you have dynamics within your organization that would make it very useful to have a neutral perspective or someone who is really skilled at navigating some personalities, an outside facilitator is really great. You don't need one to be successful, though. I think, Karen, you navigated your process. You facilitated and wrote and did it all, and I think you were successful. It's helpful, but it's not necessary. I think if you want the perspective of a consultant or a facilitator, it's really helpful. But if you don't have the budget for that, but you do have a budget, I think it's sometimes better to put it into your own organization and build the capacity from within.
I would echo that. I think it was helpful, and I would continue, actually, at this point in my work with Ozma. I wish there was an outside person who could reflect back to us on a more regular basis, because we get so active viewpoint sometimes and doesn't get mired in the details. So hopefully you have a leader or shared leadership that helps you kind of move into that higher on the balcony perspective. We hired facilitators for our retreats and a planning session that were outside the organization, and that was really nice, so that I could participate fully, even though I was a plan developer. So,
and I guess I'll add one more thing. In my facilitation experience, I typically enjoy facilitating. I think it's really useful sometimes for the organization. However, what I don't like, and I don't think is very valuable to an organization from a facilitator's point of view, is writing the plan for an organization. I think that absolutely it has to be done by the people who have to own it, use it, and oftentimes I see consultants actually writing the plan and then stepping away and having no ownership over it. And when you're given something internally as the plan. Okay, there's a bunch of questions here. Karen, you want to pick one? And
sure, I can definitely answer Jen Bott's question about the USDA grant specificity to planning. This is from the Marketing Service Division of USDA, the Farmers Market Promotion Project, otherwise known as the FMPP. That grant seems to come around every year, and it's really for helping markets and market associations do whatever is needed to expand their capacity and their ability to serve their vendors, serve their communities, create division marketing services, agricultural marketing services portion.
Okay, and then Jennifer Gibbs is looking into hiring a market manager. Is it better to hire a contractor or an employee? My two cents would be, how does that fit into your bigger vision of your organization? Are you looking to have long-term institutional knowledge and capacity, or are you looking for short-term assistance while you navigate some change? Karen, how would you handle that question?
I think that was really nicely clarified between those two needs, the long-term institutional stuff and the short-term management or kind of task-related duties that a manager might take on. Our market, the Pendleton Farmers Market, has hired a contractor for the last 5 years, and that worked well as long as we had a really, really solid board around it that could kind of hold that institutional, the pieces together. When the board shifted, and we've been transitioning now in the last couple of years, having a contractor who is also new and a board that is new has made it really, really challenging and forced the issue that is long in coming and much desired, which is to create a very clear policies and procedures manual. To have a contractor, because we weren't able to pay wages and benefits. We didn't have an office. We had no equipment. We couldn't house them anywhere. So it was really important for us to be able to put whatever monies we had into their wages and not all those other infrastructural supports. But I think we're at the time now where we want to readdress that.
Okay, any other questions?
Get the polls all answered here. Looking at who has attended. So we do have market managers, it looks like here, and one other association.
Three other, it looks like.
Yeah, so Stacy, what happens to this presentation next? How can people access it, and what are some of the ways that they can plug in and continue learning from the Farmers Market Coalition?
Thank you for asking. This webinar is going to be archived, so there will be a link that I'll send out to everybody who registered. In addition to just publicly, I'll send a link out to all our members that they will be able to access the archive online, and it will incorporate the visual, so everything that you saw with the audio, so that you'll open a link and you'll be able to watch it almost as if a movie. So look for that, and so any of you who came in late for something, you should be able to follow the whole thing through from beginning to end in that way. And I also just wanted to point out that there are a couple file share documents here, some things that Karen created for you all that might be helpful. So I'd encourage you to download those. They're in the file share pod on the bottom right of your screen. And the only other thing I wanted to point out is, all right, can you all see that? That if you haven't heard or registered for the next webinar, which is on June 23rd, that is Best Board Practices and Meetings That Matter. That's going to be facilitated by Roseanne Stead, who's with the Tide Center. And that's going to be a great session, June 23rd, same time, 1 p.m. Eastern. And for those of you who haven't registered for that, there's the link to it if you're interested. And then, of course, we'll have 4 more after that throughout the summer, so please stay tuned for that. And if you're interested in becoming a member of FMC and you're not already, I included the link right
for college farmers markets. Well, Karen?
Let's see here. Special advice. I think you're in a really great, unique setting at a college, in the college environment. So you'll have a targeted audience that's fairly well educated, maybe not terribly well heeled. So you'll be looking at ways of creating product lines or recruiting product lines that serve that target audience. Certainly, the community atmosphere can be really enhanced here. I'm sure you'll have skills and talents that come out of the woodwork for creating public entertainment opportunities. If you have a staging area for skits and music and things that really set your market off as maybe the place to get produce and I don't know. I guess volunteerism might be a pretty strong point. You'll have an opportunity to recruit from the ranks of folks. Am I getting at what you're thinking about or the questions you have?
And I would just add that if you're doing a strategic planning process, Dan, the research part might be really exciting because there's a lot of new emerging markets in the college and university settings, and there's a lot of enthusiasm. And so, and you also have people who like to do research at your fingertips. And so there's, I think, not only the potential to do some of the research and analysis broadly, different challenges than non-college and non-university based farmers markets.
Point.
Well, I think we've reached the end of our allotted time here. It's been great sharing our information with you. I hope you guys got stuff out of this and are excited about strategic planning.
Thank you very much for having the opportunity. I really appreciated being here, Stacy. It was great.
Oh, thank you. I wanted to thank both Nicole and Karen. Thank you both for being so flexible with this format, but thank you for everyone for